Now, Kyiv's battlefield position has been largely static for months. In the coming weeks, Ukraine's NATO partners are due to begin delivering the F-16 fighter jets that the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been requesting since Russia's invasion. The F-16s are among the most sophisticated weaponry being supplied to Ukraine, but they are unlikely to be an immediate game changer.
They are sleek, supersonic, and loud. F-16 Fighting Falcons are by no means the most advanced fighter jets. In fact, the first were delivered in 1976. They now cost upwards of 60 million euros each, and they're among the most versatile aerial weapons available to any military power. Useful for Ukraine, defensively and offensively.
We have agreed new, more ambitious defense plans. Allies are delivering more forces, high readiness, investing in high-end capabilities.
A stumbling block for the F-16s is that they require extensive training. Training that some Ukrainian pilots have been getting on a fast-track basis for many months here in France and other locations.
They're already mentally prepared. They're all between 21 and 23, but they're already warriors at heart.
In the coming months, Ukraine could have about a dozen pilots ready to fly F-16s, probably about 20 in total by year's end, meaning Ukraine's Air Force will likely have more F-16s than qualified pilots to fly them. Meantime, Russia now knows full well that the F-16s are coming.
Russia is striking all airfields, potential F-16 bases every day, including attempts to damage airstrips and infrastructure.
Russia's president, while in North Korea, noted that F-16 jets can strike from Ukraine into Russian territory.
That blatantly violates the international responsibilities that the Western countries took.
Analysts see the F-16s, with their modern radar systems, munitions, and jamming capabilities, as an important upgrade of Ukraine's arsenal. They'll support ground troops and be able to intercept Russian attacks in a way far superior to Ukraine's Soviet-era MiG-29s. The jets will also require parts and maintenance and diverted defense capabilities while on the ground. Whether they're a game changer against Russia, it may be, as some experts have indicated, that by putting enough game changers into the mix, Ukraine may eventually be able to change the game.
And I'm joined now by Severin Pleyer from the Helmut Schmidt University of the German Armed Forces in Hamburg. He works there as a research fellow at the Chair of Political Science and Strategic Theory. Thanks so much for your time today. Can you tell us how useful these F-16s will be for Ukraine's military, and what kind of missions are they going to be used for?
Hello, and thanks for having me. The F-16s will be basically fulfilling all the roles you mentioned just before in the video, basically air-to-air and air-to-ground, and also basically the jamming capabilities of anti-missile batteries. The problem is, however, that they are not in the quantity that might be necessary for it. And the F-16 as such is just one tool in that tool set which is given to Ukraine.
OK, so you mentioned there aren't enough. I mean, I believe Ukraine's partners have agreed to supply just over 80 F-16s. You're saying that that's not enough. What about a rate of deployment? I mean, will they be deployed fast enough to make any kind of difference?
Well, first of all, 80 sounds a lot, but we have to differentiate between the different versions of the F-16s which are supplied in that regard. So the Danish F-16s, which will be supplied, are different in a lot of ways to earlier versions, which, for example, the Dutch want to supply. So therefore, there is a bit of an overlap. And yes, you can use the spare parts, but it's not necessarily the same aircraft as such, especially when it comes to avionics. The second problem will be that, as you mentioned before, there are not enough pilots, so there will be enough aircraft to deal with the threat as such. But the problem will be the standard of training of the pilots which will be flying the aircraft, and also the quantity of pilots. Obviously, the advantage could be that the pilots who are actually flying the F-16s could get more training time and also more time in combat, so that they are actually more worthwhile, and they would have probably more aircraft per person. However, if that's really a changer, I heavily doubt it.
OK, so just to clarify, the training isn't going fast enough, is that right? And that's obviously a problem.
So the problem is, because of COVID-19, the training cycle within the US for NATO partners is already anyway backlogged. So therefore, there is not enough training capacity at the moment for Ukrainian pilots to get the status of combat ready. Even together with the French approach or the British, there's just not enough training capacity at this moment. So for about the next 6 to 12 months, the training will be very limited. So I think we're talking about 20 to 30 pilots who could actually fly these aircraft.
I see. Russia says it's just destroyed some of Ukraine's jet fighters. How vulnerable will these F-16s be to attack?
Similar to the ones which Ukraine is already using. So most of the aircraft are getting destroyed on the ground, or in operations close to the front line. The problem is that the air war in Ukraine shows that if in a contested airspace, which means that you have missile batteries, controlling the skies, limit the usability of aircraft anyway in a primary role. So therefore, the F-16s will have to anyway be dispersed throughout Ukraine. So even if a few are destroyed, that doesn't necessarily change the game. The bigger picture is how these F-16s are fitting into the operational planning and how they can support ground operations. And that's where the key lies in the F-16 deal.
Severin Pleyer from the Helmut Schmidt University in Hamburg. Severin, thanks so much for that really interesting analysis. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
Let's talk to Christopher Morris here. He's a member of the Peace, Conflict and Security Research Group at the University of Portsmouth in England. Thanks for being with us. Tell us, how useful do you think these F-16s will be for Ukraine's military? What kind of missions will they be used for?
Useful, absolutely. Game changers, unfortunately, not so much. So one of the things that they're going to be absolutely essential for is plugging into effectively the air defense system that Ukraine has. So they're going to be very capable in that role. And also they're going to be good at pushing back some of the Russian jets. Now, we're going to be seeing some very interesting missions from these F-16s. Things like, long-range strikes and supporting troops on the front line. They're probably not going to be used in air-to-air combats. They're probably not going to be used for, things like close ground support in proximity to the front line. But yeah, they're going to be very helpful. The radars that they're equipped with are going to be very useful in kind of pushing back those Russian jets. And depending on what weapon systems they kind of are packaged with, they could make a tangible change to the battle that is unfolding. But in terms of fundamentally shifting the balance of the conflict, well, that's unfortunately unlikely.
Ukraine's partners have so far agreed to supply just over 80 F-16s. Is that enough, and can they be deployed fast enough to make a real difference?
Now, what we're talking about here is effectively providing a country that has previously operated aging Soviet aircraft with, relatively modern, we're talking 90s era, Western NATO kit. Now, usually this would be a generational project, taking in excess of a decade for pilots and ground crews to build up the aggregate experience and the infrastructure required to operate these jets effectively. What's being accomplished in Ukraine is incredible, but it is being done very rapidly. So in terms of the ability for these, 80 or so aircraft to really shift the balance of conflict, it's a very good start. But, integrating them with ground forces is going to be immensely difficult. And, in terms of them having an immediate, game-changing effect, I would be hesitant to predict that.
Now, Russia has been attacking Ukrainian airfields. It says just today that it's destroyed some of Ukraine's jet fighters. How vulnerable, Christopher, will the F-16s be to attack?
Well, now, This is one of the obvious routes that Russia is going to try and take. They're going to try and take out the ground-based infrastructure. You know, it's a far easier target. Unlike the F-16s themselves, it doesn't move around. Now, fortunately, Ukraine does have the benefit of, limited air defense, and this would be an immensely costly kind of process for Russia to seriously engage with. Yeah, on the one hand, they can absolutely strike these bases with long-range ground attack weapon systems. But, if they really want to take them out, they're going to have to engage in some kind of sortie into Ukraine. And, they don't want to be risking their air force either. So, yes, whilst that is the tactic that we can predict that Russia is going to be employing, in terms of carrying it off, it's going to be difficult for them as well.
Now, Ukraine says it's considering stationing some of the new F-16s in other Eastern European countries, such as Poland. How might Russia respond to that, Christopher?
Well, now, in terms of what is going to be stationed in Poland, it is going to be necessary. Now, in terms of establishing serious maintenance, kind of depot-style maintenance in Ukraine, that's difficult. Again, they're used to operating old Soviet aircraft. Their runways are, not ideal, and their ground-based infrastructure is not all that we might desire as well. Poland already operates F-16s, and it would make an ideal location for serious maintenance as well as training. Now, in terms of how Russia might react, they're certainly not going to like that. Poland is already kind of beefing up its air defense and, preparing for Russian, I suppose, mischief and incursions. Of course, you've also got to balance that against the fact that Russia is kind of already doing everything it really dares to do in terms of interfering with NATO members. So, there's cause for concern, but I wouldn't be too worried there.
Christopher, thank you very much for talking with us. That was Christopher Morris there from the University of Portsmouth.
Thank you so much.